Good afternoon, Eastern Washington. This is Matt Shea, and welcome to Patriot Radio, broadcasting live from the capital of free Washington, Spokane Valley, brought to you once again by the Committee to Elect Matt Shea, Republican, in the legacy of Dr. Stan Monteith, bringing you the story behind the story and the news behind the news. And it's not about right or left, it's about right and wrong. It's about doing the hard work to implement freedom, because our hope is not in man, but in Jesus Christ. And we can't end in prayer, we must also move to action. As Exodus 15:3 says, the Lord is a warrior, the Lord is his name. Are we warriors? Now, part of being a warrior is confronting other people about certain things and having a polite discussion. But in today's culture, we have lost really the training, if we're ever trained at all, in how to disagree. And it's really kind of becoming bothersome that there is really not an intellectual discourse anymore. It is devolving into emotion. And that you can't, when you bring up primary source documents, you bring up facts, people still can't understand what you're arguing about, even though the facts support your position. They can't argue the facts. They can't, they just go on emotion, what they've been pre-programmed. And if you are a young person listening today, especially, don't fall into that, because that is a lie of the devil. It's not how you grow as a Christian if your response is always emotional. In fact, I would say that has been one of the greatest detriments to our culture, our heritage, our traditions. This emotional response, this inability to argue logically with facts and primary source documents, and you still may have a disagreement, but at least you have it all out on the table and you can pray through it. Today, I want to go through this, and came across a great article by Paul Graham back in 2008. It talks about the hierarchy of disagreement today. And I want to go through this briefly, because we need to learn, and if you've been on my Facebook page, you know that I'm a stickler about it. It's not just some sort of emotional thing. You need to have your facts. And if you refuse to present facts and it's just emotion, then then you are engaging in discourse that just isn't helpful to anybody. So the disagreement hierarchy starts with name calling. That's the first one you'll see online. I put up something like peer-reviewed paper says this, and immediately is all you religious zealots are defending your position. Okay, that's name calling, all right? Because there's no fact. It's just all you religious zealots say that kind of thing, right? And then it goes to the second stage, which is an ad hominem attack. It's a fancy way of saying a personal attack. It's a little bit more than name calling. It's more like his views shouldn't count because he must be a bad guy because he's Christian, or he's a religious zealot. Here's the name calling part of it. And then they say, and he goes out and street evangelizes, so we can't trust anything he says because he's one of those kind of Christians. Okay, that's an ad hominem attack. When you have discourse online, you're talking about an issue, and it's important to talk about politics. It's important to talk about religion. It's important to talk about these things. In fact, these are the things we should be talking about at the dinner table, not avoiding, because we've misunderstood that religion really is our vertical relationship with God. Politics is our horizontal relationship with each other. So those are the things that matter, right? We should be talking about this. But if we're going to do it, you don't respond by calling somebody a name. And you don't respond by saying, well, they must be a bad guy as a Christian, because they go out and they do that kind of stuff and street evangelize, it must be horrible, right? That doesn't work. But then if you kind of get past that, then you have what people have done to me quite a bit, and it's annoying, okay, because it shows that somebody's devoid of intellectual capability. Okay? They respond to your tone. Okay? So instead of responding to what you said, they respond to the way you said it. And honestly, it's cowardly to do that. If somebody's yelling and you're actually trying to love your neighbor, love your brother, sister, family member, listen to what they're actually saying. Don't respond to the tone. Well, no, there's a time to get them to calm down or something. Yes, absolutely. But listen to what they're actually saying. Don't respond to the tone. And I'm talking intellectual discourse. I'm not talking yelling and screaming in a home off the wall for no reason. Okay, I'm talking about intellectual discourse. But this idea of, well, you said that in a very snarky tone, or you said that in a very, and they don't address what you said. It's a cowardly way of trying to attack back. So don't do that. Respond to what they said. And if somebody was saying it in a heightened voice, was louder than normal, you can say after you've responded to what they said, and in the future, you can tell me the same point at a lower decibel. Okay, I'm right here. People appreciate that because what you've done is you've respected where they're at, responded to what they said. And again, you're trying to keep the facts and logic, not emotion. Then you'll see people who will try to simply state the opposing case with little or no evidence. Okay. So calling names doesn't work, personal attack doesn't work. They say, oh, your tone is hateful or something like that, and you haven't put anything in there that's hateful. You pass that, and they say something along the lines of, everyone knows global warming is real. Okay? And that's the response. If there's no evidence, it's just a simply contradictory statement. Okay? That's a logical fallacy. You haven't backed it up with anything. So don't do that either. And then you have people who will respond actually with a counter argument. And this is getting into decent discourse at this point. So you're past the name calling, you're past the responding to tone, like the coward's way of avoiding to addressing the issue. You're past the just somebody who has memorized the contradictory response, and you get to actually a counter argument. Now, unfortunately, it's common for people when they counter argue to tweak it just a little bit and not actually argue the point the person is saying, but argue a slightly different point that is more favorable to them. Don't fall into that trap, and understand when somebody else does that, call them out on it. That's not the point that I argued. That's a slightly different point that may be more favorable to what you're saying, but my point is this, and get them back on track. That's important. Once you get to that point, you can actually begin the formal refutation, okay? In other words, you are refuting the point of the person. Now, some people will refute with a little evidence. Some people will actually refute the central point, or they'll refute the evidence of somebody. That's where you want to get to in constructive discourse, where you're saying, well, what you have brought up can't be true because, and you cite your evidence. And you always look to the veracity of the evidence. Is it backed up? Could it be looked at a different way? Is there maybe something that you don't know that could be influencing that point? And that actually is the kind of iron sharpening iron we as Christians need to do to go forward. So I wanted to bring this up today because I've been seeing it so much in social media lately, we're going to talk, we're going to train how to disagree. Now, if somebody brings me a point and they say, here's the evidence on my side, and I say, okay, here's the evidence on my side, and we come to the point that, well, there's no real good answer here, we'll have to choose one or the other, then that's where you could pray through it together as brothers and sisters, right? Come together, unity. Now, I hope that makes sense to everybody. I'm just sick and tired of it wasn't what you said, it was the way you said it. Okay, that aside, address my point. Okay? We need to get to that again as Christians and Americans to allow ourselves to be sharpened and to be able to sharpen others. That's what we're called to do. And we shouldn't be afraid of that. I think what people are afraid of today in discussion is being called names and all of the personal attacks and, oh, it's not what you said, it's the way you said it, and all this garbage, instead of just getting to what we're actually talking about. We'd be better as Americans if we did that. And that brings me to your daily intelligence briefing on the international front. The Iranians and the Saudi leadership shakeup continuing to fester in the Middle East. What's shaping up really is an Iranian-Saudi Arabia war. And it's very apparent to me that Syria, once that kind of just gets cleaned up, there's going to be something between the two countries. There is a lot of rhetoric going back and forth, a lot of yelling, screaming, name-calling, just like we talked about. No discourse, truly intellectual discourse. So let's keep our eyes on that. But make sure you watch Lebanon. That's the Iranian proxy country where they have quite a bit of terror cells on the border with Israel. Part of this, I think, is why Chinese troops are deploying to Syria, because they're going to act as a buffer between the two countries. Also on the international front, Russia. The spike in radioactive pollution still a mystery. We're going to keep our eyes on that as we continue to go forward. And next on the international front, North Korea. Missile test by the end of the year? Yes. It looks like they're prepping for another missile test. Looks like it's a week or two out from the sources I have. Maybe a little earlier. I doubt it. But looks like they're prepping. Now, I want to say that the missile test that they just conducted was successful in that they had a dummy nuclear warhead on it, and that it got to EMP altitude, again, according to DEBCA file. But bottom line is they have the technology now. So it's up to Trump what he wants to do about that. And speaking of Trump, also on the international front, the news is that tomorrow Trump will recognize Jerusalem as the Israeli capital, but he is going to delay the embassy move of the United States to Jerusalem by 6 months. Many Middle East leaders up in arms, some saying this is particularly Turkey, this is the red line for the Islamic world. I think it's about time we truly recognize what the capital of Israel is. Been dancing around this issue for a long time. I think it's the right thing to do. Also on the international front, this is an interesting story out of Montreal, Canada. You have a lot of articles over the last year on something called primary water. The idea that there is a process deep within the earth that creates water and oil as well, by the way, which is kind of borne out by the math that not enough dinosaurs died to account for the sheer mass of oil that's under the ground, and that some of the oil fields they thought were depleted are filling back up. So there's this idea of primary water, that there are huge bodies of water buried under the earth. And this was brought up in January in a scientific paper that there may be as much as the entire Earth's oceans underneath in fresh water. Now, curiously, along this line, a huge Ice Age cavern with fresh water was found underneath the city of Montreal recently. And they've explored it, but they don't know where it ends yet. And when I say massive cavern, we take a look at this thing, and it looks like it was intentionally carved. It's almost rectangular in shape. And it's so deep that the aquifer that's underneath there is filling it. So I just think there's a lot of things under the earth maybe we don't know about, and they're continuing to explore it, but just fascinating stuff on that. And that brings me to the national front, and just an interesting issue. Now, there are many flaws with the theory of evolution, many flaws. The fossil record has not borne out with transitional species. The idea of dynamic organization at the cellular level is disproving evolution. The fact that there exist complex systems at the cellular level is disproving evolution. In fact, Darwin admitted that if there were complex systems at the cellular level, that would disprove his theory. Apparently, they're not taking Darwin at his word, but whatever. There's a lot of things, but one of them that's very interesting about the theory of evolution, it throws it really into chaos, aside from the fossil record, is the finding recently of soft tissue in dinosaur bones that are supposed to be 190 million years old, okay? Give or take a few million years, obviously. And they also found in China recently dinosaur eggs with embryos in them still. Again, soft tissue. But there was a paper written on this that talks about the fact that this soft tissue existence would tend to prove that the Earth is much younger than 190 million years. Because how would the soft tissue have ever survived? So there's a peer-reviewed paper put out about this by Mark Armitage. Instead of refuting what he said, university fired him and then settled for $400,000, for wrongful termination. I really believe that this is the type of, failure to have true intellectual discourse where somebody is just summarily dismissed as a Christian, even though they have a peer-reviewed paper showing that the Earth has to be much younger because of the existence of soft tissue in dinosaur bones. So, a fascinating issue, something to talk about, I think, with your family. There are Christians all over the map on this. But what I would say is that as the theory of evolution continues to fall apart, and many molecular biologists are now saying it just cannot be true because of the complex processes at the cellular level, I think these other things we need to take a look at as well. Dinosaur bones. Jurassic Park, they actually have an egg, an embryo. It's Jurassic Park all over again. They found collagen. That's specifically the substance. So can that be replicated? Can DNA be extracted? I don't know. It's just fascinating. But we're going to shift gears now to the national front and talk about a little bit what's going on the Western land front. Donald Trump doing one of the most historic moves of a president in modern times and shrinking the Utah monuments that were kind of a big land grab under Clinton and Obama. Shrunk the Bears Ears Monument from 135 million acres back to 228,000 acres. And the Grand Staircase Escalante Monument, which is so controversial, will be split into three sections and shrunk from 1.9 million acres to 1 million acres. So Donald Trump doing just a great job of reclaiming Western lands and dealing with what really has become a push to exterminate the modern American farmer and rancher and just move them into cities. Also on the national front, Slaughterbots. Watch the movie, go on Start Page, type in Slaughterbots, take a look at what technology will be capable of here in about 7 years, maybe less. It's not meant to scare people. It's meant to provoke conversation about how we continue to protect people's rights and how swarming drones that are weaponized can be a very dangerous thing. Also, more news, flying cars by 2020, and a lot of stuff happening with that, both in England and in America. The Autonomous Vehicle Task Force, yours truly, is on it right now, talking about a lot of this stuff. We're moving so fast, folks. It'll make your head spin how fast this is coming. Also on the national front, Roy Moore. Remember him? Well, next week is the vote, but he is now leading by about 7 points again. His opponent, and this is despite all of the smear campaign. And to Donald Trump's credit, he's coming out and supporting Roy Moore. Looks like the Republican National Committee is getting back on board after they finally showed there's a lot of holes here and that this was a smear campaign. Folks, I want you to remember this. Roy Moore did exactly the right thing. He did not back down. He stood his ground. He looked him in the eye. Exactly what you got to do against these social justice warrior people that try to destroy good conservative Christians. And understand that this is going to start happening more and more, not just at these big levels, at the Senate level, but it'll happen at the lower levels, state and local. In fact, it did during this last election cycle to a certain extent. But just remember this. When you start seeing these just ridiculous smear things come out, wait. See if it holds up to scrutiny. Because in the case with Roy Moore, it really hasn't. And many people believe that it wasn't Democrats that actually leaked some of the stuff. It was actually some of the senior leadership in the Republican Party in the U.S. Senate that leaked this stuff, a.k.a. Mitch McConnell. So we'll see if that bears out in the weeks to come. But it looks like Roy Moore is headed to victory. And that's going to shake the Senate up like they don't even know what's about to hit them. Or maybe they do, and that's exactly why they're doing what they're doing right now. On the regional front, the bunnies have been released, but we are not going to talk about that because my guest is going to talk about that today, Shari Dovale, and we'll get to her here in a second. I do want to say, though, that Redoubt News has done a phenomenal job of bringing things to the fore. Really done a great job. And I want to also highlight, too, that, at the national level, there's been so much happening, with Donald Trump and the fact that this Mr. Strzok, interesting name, who led the investigation into Hillary Clinton's emails, who was having apparently a relationship with an FBI lawyer who worked both for Mr. Mueller and Deputy Director Andrew McCabe, who was accused of conflict of interest in a Clinton probe. All these people are connected, and this is the guy, Strzok, that was fired. You think that the investigation is compromised with Mueller. I think it's totally compromised. I think it lacks credibility now in any way, shape, or form. But Redoubt News has been covering a lot of stuff, too, more at the regional level, about how this swamp, especially in the BLM, has been just targeting ranchers. So, what's happening to Trump, you see this just ridiculously connected, really kind of sordid, actually, web that is there at the national level. Well, it's down and impacts lower levels as well. the swamp and the BLM in particular. We're going to talk with Shari Dovale about that here in a second. On the local front, the county commissioners vote to increase your property taxes here in Spokane County. Josh Kearns voted no to the property tax increase, and then they voted on a budget, Josh Kearns again voting no, that leaves a $4.5 million hole because of shifting of funds that they did to start 2019. So the way they budgeted, they started with a hole in 2019 of $4.5 million because they shifted money. So upsetting. So upsetting. Anyway, Josh Kearns doing a great job holding the line there, but just shows you that, taxes and budget stuff, we need to be Republicans, do what we say we believe. Increasing property taxes and shifting budget holes into the future is not a Republican ideal. It just isn't. It's very upsetting to a lot of business owners that I know and a lot of people out there. So share that with your friends and neighbors. Let them know property tax increase is coming in Spokane County. Lastly, on the local front, Chris Tonto Peranta. If you don't know who that is, it's one of the guys who was at Benghazi. If you watched the movie 13 Hours, you saw him. He is going to be here in Spokane, December 8th, 7 o'clock, Discovery Place out in the Valley. You can go online and buy tickets right now, and you get to hear his story firsthand. I mean, I'm really looking forward to this. Chris Perano, the guy that was in Benghazi, going to be in Spokane, December 8th, Discovery Place out in Spokane Valley. So, go online, take a look at it. You can go to zaconfoods.com. They have the event up on their page. And just really looking forward to hearing this story and what really happened there. I know many of you are as well. And that's the briefing. Remember, the antidote to dependency and socialism is to be a God-fearing, self-reliant, freedom-loving American. Thank you to everybody that has been praying for us. And make sure you go to Facebook/Patriot Radio US, like the page, share it with your friends and family. And if you want to keep us on the air, you can go to voteshea.com. But the last day to donate is December 8th. So we're going to a freeze after that. So make sure, if you want to keep us on the air, send your checks in now or go online and donate. Because that freeze is a hard freeze. We can't accept any money after that. Well, it's my pleasure to introduce you once again to Shari Dovale, the Redoubt News reporter who has you've been on national news now because you're breaking stories. It's been so awesome to follow what you're doing a great job.
Hi, Matt. Thanks for having me on.
Well, so okay. Let's start, and I want you to get into the details here because everybody wants to know what is going on down in Nevada.
It's been quite the roller coaster ride down there, actually. I did not know we've all known that our country's been in trouble, but I did not know the extent of it until I actually watched this trial. The federal court system, the federal judiciary, is just filled with corruption. And that is why they have a better than 99% conviction rate. They've got it rigged to where the little guy is not going to get a fair chance. And God has taken over this trial and has performed some miracles. The defendants, with the exception, and I'll explain that, of Clive and Bundy, all of the current defendants have been released. Joe O'Shaughnessy was released today, and he was the last one awaiting trial. Clive and Bundy did not accept release. He was granted release, but he did not accept it because he wanted, first, to make sure that everybody else had been released, and second, he wants to be released as a free man without conditions such as ankle bracelet and halfway house. He wants to walk out of there and go home with his wife. Now, he may still get granted that. That is not out of the realm of possibility because after, the prosecution got caught with their fingers in the cookie jar, that's when all the release hearings started. The prosecution has been withholding evidence, not producing discovery. At one point, they had a video, and the defense said they had wanted to see it. The judge asked the prosecution why they didn't turn it over, and the prosecution said because the defense didn't ask us for it first. So they've had every excuse in the world why they aren't turning over this evidence. And they've made more of evidence than is actually true. They've actually lied in the courtroom to the judge herself, and it's all just starting to come out. I do not think it is out of the realm of possibility that within a week this whole case could go away.
This is amazing.
It is.
I mean, this is a big deal.
They had a high-level attorney on the stand last week, and Ryan Bundy got him to admit not only had he never read the Constitution, but the federal government does not abide by the Constitution. They only follow case law. And you're the attorney, you have to explain that to me.
I'll tell you.
The importance of case law, to me, the importance would be on the Constitution.
Well, I'll tell you something kind of interesting. We weren't required in law school to read the Constitution cover to cover. I don't know if you knew that or not.
Is just amazing to me.
It was recommended, but there wasn't like an assignment that took you, clause by clause through the Constitution. And it's fascinating they would actually finally be honest and admit that they don't follow the Constitution. But the withholding of exculpatory evidence or evidence that would tend to favor the defense that's punishable. I mean, that's sanctionable stuff when they do that. And they were doing it with a lot of different documents and things. If you could kind of walk through for us, what were some of the things they were withholding from the defense?
There is a report called a threat assessment. This is something that had been done early on, actually a few years ago. The defense has never seen this, but this is the document that they've been referring to every time a detention hearing would come up. And they said that, the Bundys and their supporters are very dangerous men. They're a danger to society. They're a flight risk. They won't come back to court, on and on and on. Well, the judge finally understood that nobody's seen the document, and she ordered the prosecution to produce the document. And that was done in a sealed hearing. There has been more sealed hearings than open hearings in this entire court battle. I've never seen any case go with so many sealed hearings. But this was produced to the judge, or at least discussed. I can only assume it was produced in this sealed hearing. And at that point is when she immediately granted Ammon Bundy release, changed Ryan Bundy's release terms so he could go home and not to the halfway house, and started the process of everybody else getting released. I am told that the document flat out says that the Bundys have never been considered a threat.
So do you know that for sure? That's what you're surmising?
I have been told this. I have not seen the document.
So wow, that is a bombshell, because they built this entire case as if they were this material threat to all the agents on the ground there. And if they had a threat assessment that they weren't a threat, there goes that's their entire case. And that's what you're saying is the judge just saw that and said, okay, yeah, it's very likely now that they're going to be found not guilty, so I'm letting them out.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I say, I do believe that. I think at the very least we're going to see a mistrial, but I know they don't want that. They want a dismissal at the very least. I know they would prefer to continue with the trial and get the not guilty. That way they could bring all the evidence out of the misconduct of the government and the prosecution. How the judge is going to handle it is anybody's guess.
So but there were some
apparently is so much more between what happened in the grand jury, evidence that has not been presented, and quite a bit of other things. The world needs to see this. The world needs to see how the federal government is acting and reacting to the citizens of the country. How they are pursuing what they consider justice and what they actually consider justice. This is just not the way our country is supposed to be. And that's why this case is so important and why the whole world needs to see it, and the whole world is watching. There's another part of the problem for the government.
It's stunning. It's absolutely stunning. The idea, too, that this wasn't the only exculpatory evidence that was withheld, that there was some pretty serious allegations, at least on the part of Agent Love, of him tampering with evidence in another case and some other things. But what have you seen along that line? What else were they withholding? What else is kind of shocking in a bombshell? Because I know, and we'll get to it later in the show, that the BLM, you had one article on this, that the BLM was involved in this very high-profile case down in California as well.
Yeah, the Steinle case, yeah. That one, we have the same BLM agent involved in both cases. But Dan Love, getting back to him, I think we're going to see more of him. He's ready to roll. He's ready to roll on everybody that fired him. I watched his testimony via Skype. They did not actually bring him into the courtroom. And he was angry. This is a very angry man. He was angry because he was the incident commander and was not allowed to give any orders. He was taking orders from, it's believed to be from D.C., but it could have been then U.S. Attorney Daniel Bogdan. He was involved, and Dan Love named him in such a way, I can explain that, as the one who gave the order to stand down and release the cows. Basically, they would not allow him to say Daniel Bogdan gave this order, but what he was allowed to say was, all right, you had this phone call, and how soon after this phone call with Bogdan did you release the cattle? He said immediately. So it was very carefully designed to name him without actually doing so. But that also brings up the fact that the U.S. Attorney's Office has been involved in this case since before anybody in the country had even heard of it. We've got a couple of tips that the Assistant U.S. Attorney, Nadia Ahmed, was actually in Bunkerville on the 3rd of April, 2014, before any of the protesters got there.
Was that disclosed to the defense?
I'm sorry?
Was that fact disclosed to the defense?
No, not any time early. They may know about it now. The discovery, that's something that's amazing to me. Their discovery is so huge. I understand it's like 4 terabytes. I mean, this massive, massive amount of documents that they threw in, without any rhyme or reason. They threw in 2 complete novels, medical records from unrelated people, children's medical records. They threw all this in there just to distract and make it hard for the defense to get through. That's why some of it is only, just started coming out in the last few months, is because they don't have somebody dedicated to going through the discovery. They just can't afford it. They don't have the funds that the prosecution has. So they've slowly gone through it. Pete Santilli actually spent an awful lot of time going through the discovery. All of the defendants did. The defendants are the ones actually coming up with the major points, and they don't always realize what they're saying until later, okay? Such as the pictures of the prosecutor at Bunkerville. They didn't know who these people were until they got into the courtroom and saw them and said, oh, wait a minute, I know her. I saw her in that picture. So this is how some of these things are coming out. There's been a lot of discovery has come out after the trial started. And there's part of the problem. All this stuff, and then it's not just what's in the discovery, it's stuff they find out that's not in discovery at all. There's the problem. They're hiding way too much information. They're hiding all the key points that are obvious. They are implying things that are not true. such as the grazing fees. They've made all kinds of implications that the Bundys, owe $1 million in grazing fees. But they've never once sent a bill for grazing fees. They did, however, send a bill for trespass that was less than $9,000 without their fees. So it's all misdirection, lies by implication, lies by omission, and direct lies. So the prosecution is in way over their head on this case.
So do you think, because there's been a lot of pressure put on by state representatives, by Raul Labrador, and then there was a flurry of attempts to plea out after some letters were received by Attorney General Sessions. Do you think that even if there is just a mistrial, I mean, obviously a straight dismissal with prejudice would be the ideal situation, but if there was a true mistrial and not a dismissal, do you think, though, that under the current administration, they would even pursue this anymore? Or do you think it would be dead?
My personal belief is that the judge and the prosecution are getting some pressure from D.C. The prosecution is getting pressure because of misconduct, or potential misconduct, I should actually say, because, I'm not the legal person here. But it's all potential misconduct on them. The judge has been proven to be biased for the prosecution and against the defense, which I believe that when that made headlines, that's when she started getting some pressure to basically even it out a little bit, pay a little bit more attention to the defense. And currently, I think that they're both getting pressure from D.C. to make this whole case go away.
This is unreal. So what else has stood out in your mind as you've watched this, and what do you think is next? I mean, is there a hearing coming up? I mean, all this stuff being sealed, I understand it was like a 1,000-page briefing, and it's enough to have a 100-page briefing, but a 1,000-page briefing is pretty extraordinary. So
that was mostly with attached exhibits. The briefing itself was probably not more than, 20 pages. But the exhibits that went with it is what made it extraordinary. What's coming up, I can tell you this much. Larry Klayman has filed a lawsuit in D.C. against Jeff Sessions related specifically to this case. And I am told, though again I have no confirmation on this, but I am told that the judge, Navarro, and the prosecutor, Myrie, may have to go and testify at this hearing on this lawsuit, and that will be on the 19th of December.
Wow. And the lawsuit is for what, abusive process?
Yeah, I've got a copy of, I've got a link to the actual documents on the website. It is, he's basically calling him out for not doing anything about this when he was told about it. He was told of all the problems within this case and the violations within this case, et cetera, and he basically ignored it and walked away and turned his back. So Larry Klayman filed the lawsuit on behalf of Clive and Bundy for that, and it actually has a hearing on the 19th.
So what else can we expect to come out that maybe people haven't heard about in regards to this? Because, I mean, this is already... It's just unbelievable. And people, still to this day, people try to say, oh, this doesn't happen with the federal government. And here it is, in black and white, withheld evidence, a lead agent who was fired and then accused of tampering with evidence. And all kind of, not necessarily in this case, but in a separate case, but still. I mean, when you have those kind of things happen, it really throws the credibility of the Bureau of Land Management out the window.
Oh, they have no credibility left as far as I'm concerned. They've shown their true colors, and they need to go away. It's just one of those organizations that, just doesn't even need to exist. They've got other groups that can handle the management of I'm one of those people, though, that believe that the state should own land anyway. Okay, I don't believe in federal ownership of public land. But if we haven't gotten to that point, there are other organizations that would do a much better job managing the land than the BLM has obviously done. You know, they've become more of a militarized police organization than they have anything to do with land management. That's when they've gone too far, when all they're about is law enforcement and militarized units. They don't need to be managing land. They have nothing to do with managing land at that point.
Well, let's talk a little bit about this Steinle case down in California. This is the case everybody has been talking about, where an illegal immigrant was acquitted of murder and manslaughter of Kate Steinle. And the BLM was actually involved in this case. And a lot of people don't know this, so you're going to have to educate folks on how the BLM was involved in this case.
Certainly. The illegal immigrant that killed this beautiful young woman did so with a gun that he claims to have found. The gun was stolen from a BLM agent. The BLM agent was very careless in how he handled the gun. He actually, as I understand it, broke the law as well as BLM internal policies because he did not secure his weapon correctly. He also had a second gun he didn't secure correctly, but that didn't make as many headlines. There were two guns, though. One got stolen. There was a time frame that they could not actually track it, so that's why the BLM was trying to. That's part of why the BLM was trying to keep this guy out of the trial. They didn't want him testifying. They actually, the defense actually had to do a 20-some page report or motion, rather, to convince the judge to order the testimony of this BLM agent. The BLM claimed to have a policy that said that they do not allow their employees to testify or produce department records by either request or subpoena. Now, this is the same organization that is 90% of the testimony in the Bundy trial, but they don't allow their employees to testify, okay, according to the Steinle case. Now, this man not only did not get charged for not securing his weapon, he didn't get punished internally or anything else, but 5 months after Miss Steinle died, he was actually promoted. Now, he was promoted. His supervisor was a man named Salvador Niebles. Now, Salvador Niebles, he, like I say, not only did he have involvement with this through this particular BLM ranger, but he was also the same BLM agent that we have on tape telling the other BLM agents in Bunkerville to ignore what the sheriff's deputy was saying as far as putting down their long guns, etc. He said, do not follow this man's orders. So he was not about to let the situation in Bunkerville de-escalate. The same man who promoted the guy in the Steinle case.
And let's shift back to Bunkerville for a second, too. One of the big things that came out as being exculpatory evidence not disclosed to the defense was the surveillance cameras that they continued to deny were down there, which was kind of stupid in my opinion. Everybody saw them. It just was dumb.
Right.
But the surveillance cameras that were down there, and also the presence of government snipers. And as I've maintained, sniper rifles are not due process. The fact that they had those is very troubling in America. But there was surveillance footage as well that they did not disclose to the defense down there.
That's right, absolutely. The cameras are such a big deal. At first, Ryan Bundy filed a motion several months ago asking about the information on these cameras. He knew about them. Everybody knew about them. They had pictures of them. The people did that were not necessarily in discovery. Everybody knew about the cameras, but the prosecution basically laughed at him and mocked him and said it was a fishing expedition for him to even ask for the information. Well, then they actually did get actual evidence into the court, and the prosecution said, oh, okay, well, fine. There was one camera. And then there was more evidence that proved that it was 3 or 4 cameras, and they had to admit that. And then the prosecution said, well, it was only one camera that was put up in the morning and taken down at night, and it had a live feed into Dan Love's office, but nobody watched it. And then they said, there was an IP address that anybody could watch it if they were given, such as the people in D.C. or Las Vegas, but nobody watched it, nobody recorded it, nobody took notes on what they were saying, and Dan Love's great big giant screen TV in his office was ignored the whole time it was on. And the judge, I'm surprised she didn't laugh at him, but she said, this is not credible, this is not reasonable. And
that's
basically
to her
she
credit.
shut down Prosecutor Myrie with those statements right there. Bring all the evidence in. We're not doing this anymore. And that was quite an interesting day, because Prosecutor Myrie had been given every single thing he had asked for up until that point. The judge had given him everything. And all of a sudden she shut him down, saying, wait a minute, now you've gone over the line. And he totally, lost control of everything. When Ryan Bundy, and this is amazing, when Ryan Bundy made his opening statements, somebody said, and I have not seen the transcript of President Trump's remarks in Utah, but somebody said that he may have used some of Brian Bundy's opening statements on this, because it was so impressive. And from there, he was able to use the Constitution, and the prosecution could not shut him down for it. He was able to admit his own pocket Constitution to the witness to read from. The jury started perking up and asking questions about the Constitution, and all that Prosecutor Dan Sheets could do was put his head in his hands and just sit there and shake his head. He could not stop it, which has always been stopped in the past. And that, like I say, that's when they totally lost control of this entire case.
And because of that, it's very likely that they're just not going to continue to pursue it. I don't know how they would. I mean, it would be just an extraordinary waste of money to try to continue to pursue this, especially when it's very clear the evidence that was withheld from the defense was so damaging to the prosecution's case. It's amazing that nobody has yet been sanctioned for that. I mean, it's a huge deal for prosecutors to withhold exculpatory evidence. They take it very seriously, the ones that I know, very seriously. And the fact that much was withheld with that flimsy of reasoning is very troubling. Do you see, is the trial going to continue? Or is it in, where is it at right now? Are they, taking a break and waiting, or what's kind of the next procedural steps?
This week was a pre-planned recess. I believe one of the attorneys had a prior case scheduled that he could not change before the jury was ever seated. So this week was already planned, but with everything that came out, when they do go back into session on the 11th, I expect some big things to happen on that date.
So the big day is the 11th, huh?
Yes, that's when they get back into session.
All right. Well, Shari, I just appreciate so much what you're doing with Redoubt News. It's just been terrific following everything. Your articles are phenomenal. I know InfoWars has had you on a couple times for interviews. Yeah. So anyway, if people want to find Redoubt News, they want to maybe help you guys keep reporting and support you, where can they go?
RedoubtNews.com. That's RedoubtNews.com, or they can find us on Facebook.
How is it being interviewed on InfoWars? Because it's happened to me a couple times. How did you take that?
I have not met Alex Jones. I've only dealt with David Knight, and he's really a great guy. He makes it easy for me, actually. He was there, so he understands an awful lot of what happened. So he kind of knows where he wants to go with the interviews, and he's really a good guy.
Yeah, I love his very to the point approach to things. It's been very helpful to me in the past. But I just want to thank you again for being on Patriot Radio, Shari, and you just take care of yourself. Keep reporting, and I'd love to have you on as soon as we can, and as close to the 11th as we can, back on the show to tell the listeners what happened.
Absolutely, I'll be there anytime you want me to.
All right, Redoubt News. You can check them out online, and Shari has done a great job. A lot of their articles people don't even know about, and they're very impactful to our region. One of the fastest growing, at least as far as watches on and views on social media, Redoubt News. And, it's right here in our backyard. We've asked, a lot of people have asked me, I've asked for, a news outlet that is credible, can report the facts, and they're doing it. And we need to support them in it. We really do. Well, I want to end the show today again by reminding you, if you get a chance, talk with your family tonight about how do you disagree. You don't call people names. You don't personally attack them. You don't object to their tone. You don't throw things out there that you've just memorized. But you actually have to do some research, cite some facts, show how those facts are verified, and talk about the central points of the issue. And if we do that, we're going to come together as Americans. This whole thing with the Bundy Ranch down there in Nevada, that's the type of debate we should be having. Instead, it's, they're terrorists, or they're this or that. Well, it clearly appears that the government was in the wrong down there. May God bless you all. Good night.